We even find money. Cincinnati has executed an agreement between the Parks Department and the Parks Foundation, yeah, the foundation role, where the part of the MSD's cost will be to pay Parks and Rec to maintain the new surface BMPs. All of a sudden, Parks and Rec has a new revenue source to pay its employees, and enhanced green spaces and the expansion of the Parks network where that works out. And MSD can say to the Department of Justice, look, we have a responsible public entity maintaining the surface BMPs. Big, big step in the right direction. Waitsfield, and Paul would love the spreadsheet that goes with this. We're actually going to be, because of the structure that we've come up with, we're going to be able to use private funds for payback as match on a state and tribal assistance grant, which is in turn creating a revenue stream for the town to pay back the state revolving fund loan that it took out for the system that is now pretty much dead. That has gone a long way towards making it palatable for the town to continue to work on this, because as we all know, it's exhausting on town resources, mental, financial time, library space, etc. And then we are also, very, very important, making extensive use of the sewer facilities plan to put together the new facilities plan, the new sort of improvised filter. There's a lot of stuff that has been done in the engineering department that is just as valid for a decentralized facilities plan as it was for the central system. You're not necessarily taking things that are easy or well suited to the challenge, but it's what you got on the ship, and it's what you're going to have to do. And you know, you go through this NASA transcript, which is really kind of fun. They talk about the challenges that they had, and moon bags were collapsing, and they didn't know what to do. But there's the unit they came up with, which is actually now in NASA headquarters in a little display case. Not very handsome contraption, but it worked. Here is Waitsfield's do-it-yourself new facilities plan. We made this on Tuesday. I'm not making this up, there it is. We have specific actions that need to be taken to ensure long-term responsible management of public funds going into privately initiated and for the time being privately owned systems. Every pink is an action that somebody has to take. The blue stickies are new agreements and structures that we are creating between A&R and the town's legal team to govern how funds will go through to manage private systems and to support the construction of private systems. Green is the content of the documents, and the white boxes on the paper are who, at this point, is going to be responsible for which pieces of this program. And then we can assess what's the cost, is it realistic, are there other options? That's the do-it-yourself chart for Cincinnati, where again, once we sort of assessed all the pieces coming together to do a new infrastructure approach instead of just a tunnel, we have 18 departments and organizations. But when we boiled it down, we really have 5 core tasks that have to be done. Every department has a piece of that. Once you think it through this way, and again, it's not fun, you'll make yourself very unpopular, you'll need a lot of coffee, but if you commit to that task, you can generally figure out that, okay, there are really only a few things that we're trying to do here. We have these agencies and organizations, and they're going to be doing this piece. Here are the landmines. What's going to go wrong? You know, which moon bag will plug up the air intake, and kind of sort that out. And everything got a lot less scary this summer once we had this on paper for Cincinnati, that EPA could go to Department of Justice and say, okay, at least we know where the landmines are. We know that some of this will be tricky, but here it is. And then it becomes a lot less theoretical and a lot more, okay, now we know what we can start to pick off. Some things will happen. This is the brownfields people looking at me when I said, you know, when we talked about prioritizing sites and then not redeveloping them after they've done all their remediation. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? A lot of these things will come off as being nuts. Media coverage. You know, in my experience, a green infrastructure type facilities approach and the financing that goes with it is a whole lot more complicated and a lot more prone to misrepresentation and confusion. And it's just something you have to be aware of and manage constantly. It's one of the hardest things to me about small community decentralized facilities planning is just explaining it. Where you start is not where you will end up. You have to kind of accept that. It's a long, strange trip, as the Grateful Dead once sang. And a really important point on transparency. One of the things we've talked about at length in Wakefield, and particularly in Cincinnati, is if your 5 or 6 core people who came up with this are hit by the beer truck or they move off to Yap and start a snorkel charter, can you explain it? The Apollo 13 guys had to be able to explain to the astronauts how to put this thing together, and they couldn't screw up. Is your management program sufficiently transparent? In Waitsfield's case, as I said, so that when I'm hit by the beer truck or I just decide to stay in California for at least a month at a time, you can figure this out. And you're not relying on something that really isn't going to be able to be explained, where the rates become clear and you know what to do and the program can evolve from there. The other thing I would just counsel is you're always going to need duct tape, but one of the real fatal flaws in a green infrastructure or a distributed plan is if somebody gets fixated on one piece of the stuff on the table. On your table for the Cape, you've got eco-toilets, you've got permeable reactive barriers, you've got aquaculture. You also will have some areas probably with central collection or step systems. You'll have some conventional approaches. They're all on the table, and if you get fixated on that one thing, whoever you are, you're sunk. Okay? It's not about the things on the table, it's how you combine and use them, and whether they can be responsibly managed into a program that, again, if your leader is struck by the beer truck, you can still exploit it and move it forward. We're using a lot of duct tape. And in Cincinnati, there are going to be glitches that are going to have to be dealt with and managed. There's probably going to be a couple of sites in the Liffron neighborhood that fail initially, or we have to do something else. Just accept that this is not going to be perfect, but just because it's perfect doesn't mean we abandon the project and go back to the way we did it before. Look at your options, really, and make sure that failure is not one of them. And hopefully, I really feel like in Waitsfield, at least we are lumbering towards some success. We're going to start to replace some really awful systems and situations with a coherent program without tearing apart the town's finances. And again, risk to the tax base is probably the single biggest driver right now, but not the only one. We are really looking for ways to be incremental, to be fiscally responsible, to minimize the town's indebtedness and give people a very clear picture, transparent picture about how the finances work. So those are a couple of places that are taken on this very scary challenge and are making some headway.
I was on the Cincinnati Stormwater Management Board advisory board for almost 20 years. The first plan they came forward with was not this green plan. It was a terrible plan with general engineering type activities. It was rejected, and surprisingly, they came back with this almost all green. So they did a good job in the end, but it didn't start out that way. So you've got to be persistent.
There was a hurricane that went through Vermont recently. Did you all learn anything from the deluge of water?
Well, it was really cool because I was at Flood Relief headquarters on the Sunday before Labor Day, watching a backhoe drive back and forth across one of the worst leach fields in town. Ironically, the damage in Wakefield was significant. It didn't really, besides the one system behind the Bridge Street Village, that really wasn't the catalyst for getting us going. We had it there, but it did distract the select board significantly for a couple of months. Ironically, it was 1998 when a smaller, but at the time we thought catastrophic flood event hit Warren, Vermont, just south, and exposed a bunch of straight pipes on the Mad River that absolutely catalyzed Warren's efforts to get a what's ended up being a small step system and a small decentralized management program in town, largely through Valerie getting connected with us as we were grappling with what to do there. So Irene damage really wasn't, the catalyst has been to deal with culverts rather than wastewater systems.
All right, thank you, Juli Beth.